This is Cecile and Fanny from
La Petite Creme,
and welcome to today's episode number 6 of our Mom Talk series with Pediatrician Dr. Perlman, which we're going to add to this conversation very shortly. Hi everyone, hello.
so let's we hope you are doing well this week and the hangover from the Christmas and the New Year Eve is done.
Hi,
how are you?
Good morning, Dr. Perlman.
Morning.
Hi. Here we go. Let's see, it's all settled. So you look lovely today. Look at that.
I'm actually in Miami.
That's
for a
why
couple
you look lovely.
days. Yes. So that's why the sun's a little different here. But but yeah. So I'm Dr. Perlman. I'm a pediatrician who's also working as a holistic coach. So joining in just to have a good time with you guys.
Yeah. As always. So today we're on episode number 6, and as we have more and more people joining today, we want to talk about handling your baby to someone else. So that's an emotional topic. It's loaded with a lot of feelings and emotions, but as much as we love our kids, at some point we have to let them be with other people. So there's a lot of different things that we're going to touch here, but if you who are watching wants to write down your feelings about that, your questions, what brought you here today, where you are in that transition. Did you choose a caretaker for your baby already? Are you looking for one? Is it something that you have concern about? Is it something that you already have experience? So write down in the comments and we'll address those. We'll be happy to tackle this topic with all of you today. So
I think it might be an interesting way to start, just because I think it is such a personal experience. It's something that, so maybe we can kind of go around the three of us and kind of describe what our choices were for our kids for like the first 5 years, what choices we had made.
Well, I was lucky because 2 of my main caregivers are right here today. It's you, Dr. Perlman, who was lucky to have as a pediatrician. He's down here in Miami. And then I was blessed to have met Fanny when I was pregnant, and she ended up caring for my little girl when she was born. So
Wow.
I had the best luck, I would say, or maybe I manifested that, and then she showed up on my doorstep one day, and that's how we met, actually, and that's how we became the youth that we are, and that's how the company La Petite Creme came together as well.
So you guys, so it was somebody that, how did you like find out about each other? Were you did she
Well, I
was
pregnant, so there was no secret, right?
Yes.
I was walking around with a big belly.
yeah.
And Fanny, you just
That was our husband kind of connected us, because Cecile's husband had an intern
at work,
at work, and my husband knew this intern. And the intern said, hey, my boss is looking for a caregiver for his future baby. And Amy answered, my husband said, hey, my wife is looking for a side job. So I contacted them, and that's it. Did an interview, and that was meant to be.
And it was interesting because as many of you know, we're from France, right? So I had my kids, I had been in the US for about 10 years when I got pregnant. And as an expat, I felt like I needed to reconnect to my roots a little bit, because even though I felt really comfortable in the US, becoming a mom kind of rooted me back into, okay, now I felt more secure in the French world of parenting for some reason, even though I wasn't a parent just yet. And meeting Fanny, who had an extensive knowledge of caring for babies as an assistant nurse for babies in France,
Yeah.
it felt really reassuring to have somebody who we share the same background. And
Yes.
it's not something I was actively looking for,
Yes.
but then when we just met each other, it felt like, oh my goodness, maybe that's the piece I'm needing to feel more comfortable in my parent role, having somebody who has the same background as I have.
So would she would come, like, were you working at the time? Were you working
I
out?
was working part-time and she would come over to my
Okay.
house, which is something very popular.
Right.
Back in France, people do that quite a bit. And also you have a lot of small caregiver we get people at their house. So they have 3, 4 children at their house. So it's like a more alternative way. We haven't found too much of that. At least here in Miami, it's not very common to have that type of daycare facility, right?
And it's an interesting idea. And the reason why I wanted to ask about what you guys did is because I think that, you have to kind of, and like you said, you weren't even walking into it thinking that these were things that were important to you. But as you kind of stepped forward into it, you were like, these are elements that are important to me. And I think before you, embark on finding a caregiver or a caregiver situation that will work for your family, you really need to spend a moment and say, like, what would give me some peace of mind?
Exactly. And as somebody mentioned here in the comment, the aspect of trust.
Yeah.
So trusting somebody else you start with your baby inside you. So you control it, and then they're in your arm and you control, and then all of a sudden you have to hand that over to somebody who is going to be adding value to that baby's life and not damage it. So that's how I felt. I don't know how you felt when it was your time too.
I think trust comes it's not natural to trust someone with your baby because it's your gut. So every time you would have the instinct that you are the better care for your baby. But I think trust can be built little by little. So first you have to meet people. If it's a daycare, you have to go and visit, I think, the daycare and ask your question. Right. And there is no forbidden question. So every question that you feel you have to ask, even if it's you will feel like I'm the annoying one, just ask your question. There is no bad question. And maybe with those answers, you will be able to build this trust and this confidence to know if your baby will be fine in this daycare or with this person.
Yes.
So it's very hard to trust, but it can be built by time and little by little.
Yeah, and I think that what we're also showing or talking about are small settings versus large settings. I've heard both ways. Some people say, I want a small setting so there's more intimate care, and I feel like 2 or 3 babies in a space is very good. But some people say, when my baby can't talk or, can't say anything, if it's a large setting, then there's at least other people watching, right? Versus like one person with 3 kids, right? So I think that trust can be found not only in the person that's taking care of them, but also in the structure which you're placing the baby. Does that make sense? So
yeah. But you don't know what's going to build, what's going to bring you comfort or safety until you actually look at different, settings. Because you answer I felt like I answered some of those questions later on when I had to put my kids into daycare when they started, growing up, is you don't know what you want or what you need until you actually face what is out there. And then you're like, wait a minute, I didn't consider that was something that made me either comfortable or uncomfortable. But seeing it, I don't see my baby here. Or I see it very well because I didn't think that. And then again, you're adding value to something that you knew what you knew, but you have to expand the scope of the possible, right?
Yeah. And I think that if you have to be, give yourself a grace. Maybe everyone's like, oh my God, this place is amazing. You have to go there. It's amazing. And you go there and you don't have a good feeling about it. Just because all your friends are doing it doesn't mean that you should do it. So like
very much so. Yeah, that's very true. Because sometimes it feels like the less confident we are in situation or decision as parents, the more we feel like we have to advertise our decisions so that we have buy-in from other people, right?
yeah,
And it feels true with daycare. It feels true with what we buy, the clothing, the choices of the school. Like as they grow up, it feels like the less confident there is overall, the more like advertising of what each one is doing.
yeah.
To be like, let me comfort myself. If somebody else buys into what I did, then maybe I didn't make such a bad decision, right?
Yeah, very much on this like performative parenting, which we talk about in terms of like replacing helicopter parenting. This whole idea of like, well, I send my kid here and I send my kid there and I do this for the kid. It doesn't matter what other people think about your decisions. You know, you literally have to look at your kid and be like, what setting will my kid really enjoy? You know, and you know, I have people. I remember when I was pregnant and I had a baby. You know, I have people that would come there. You have to put them into daycare. The kid was like 2 days old. You know, and I was just like, they're like otherwise they won't get any socialization. I'm like, the kid just wants to survive. Like the kid just wants to eat, sleep, and poop. Like literally. We're not really there where we're like, oh my God, you know, can I pick up some social skills at like 2 months old? You know, we're not doing that. So let's just be real about it. Let's not kind of, you know, make this more than, you know, your decisions have to be a reflection of what your family feels comfortable with. And then also what your, you know, what your setting is, like in terms of what you think you would want your kids to be raised. And I think that one of the things, because the trust thing is a long kind of space, you know, that it takes a while for us to kind of find the right caregivers. But let's say that you find the right caretakers. You know, you find the people that you're like, you know, this person, I feel like I can communicate with them. They listen to what I'm saying. I can afford it. So that's a big deal.
Big element, yes.
Deal, right? And it seems to, at this point, be, you know, comfortable in my space and I can kind of come in and out of it. Like, you know, I think the flexibility is a big deal because what if your job changes? What if your needs for your kids change? If you're at a place like, well, you have to do this at this amount and you're like, your kid's still young. It's like, well, that doesn't work. You know, so what if my kid's sick for like 3 months? Like I may not want to do daycare anymore. I want to be able to come out of it, you know, or I might want to, you know, go to a different place. Like, so being able to have that flexibility when those kids are that young is actually a great question to ask. You know, if they're like being a jerk about it, not so great, like maybe not necessary, you know? So I think that that's really important to ask those questions, like, you know, what your options are. But the thing that I always, you know, tell people that, you know, when we say that it's, you know, it takes a village, we say that in a good way, right? It does take a village. And it is really, really important for your kids to have multiple caretakers. And I know that sounds strange that I'm saying that. I'm not telling you they throw them in a daycare where there's like 35 kids, you know, who are all like, I'm talking about the fact that like, I don't always think it's fantastic for just mom and baby to be at home or dad and baby and nobody else, like never seeing anybody else. You know, socialization, even though it's not something where I'm like, oh my God, the 2-month-old is going to absorb everything. But in many ways, you know, you want your kids to be able to like be comfortable with other people. And I think that sometimes I see a situation where, unfortunately, mom and baby have become a bit isolated.
Mm-hmm.
Not healthy for mom, and it's not healthy for baby. And, you know, even if you're just walking around, you don't even say anything to another person. That's why, personally, I do tend to prefer urban environments. You know, environments where there are a lot of people walking around because, you know, unfortunately, we became kind of scared of people through COVID. Unfortunately, it is what it is, right? But I do think it's important for, like, you know, not people in the mall to be like picking at kids, but like for them to hear, you know, the sounds of other people around them, to hear like what's going on around, to like say, you know, to you know, eventually when they have like, you know, have people visiting, like, okay, yes, they can hold the baby and play with the baby, because those are adaptive kind of moments where the baby kind of starts to learn that, you know, there are other people in the world. And you know, in the end of the day, you don't want your kids only consoled by you.
And that the thing, it's sometimes we feel like when we choose a caretaker, we're choosing a replacement, but it's no way a replacement. It's an addition to the team.
Yeah.
So it's like That's what I can bring as a mom. That's what she can bring as a, you know, as an alternative. And then everybody adds to it so that it's 1 + 1 + 1 and not 1 = 1, right?
Yeah, I think that this is something, you know, so I'll share a little bit about my experience with caretaking that kind of colored my space. My parents are both pediatricians, so my mother had to have had a full-time in-house daycare person, not daycare person, but like nanny, I guess you would say, right? But she lived with us. And, you know, it was hard. It was 3 kids, and, you know, it became tricky because, you know, when you look in retrospect, you know, the nanny kind of knew that it was a situation where my mom really needed her. And so, you know, really took advantage of the situation. And then things got strange where, like, my sibling would call the nanny mom, and it became kind of a weird moment, you know, even being a kid, knowing like that's kind of strange, and like would have, you know, other kids, whatever. My point is that it became just uncomfortable, but there was no communication. There was no like open line of understanding where is this healthy or is this not healthy. It was kind of like a situation where I felt my mother felt like hostage to it because but she was an immigrant. When you're an immigrant, it's like, and you don't trust a lot of people. You think, oh, well, at least it's somebody from my home country, but that's not always great if that person takes advantage of the situation.
For sure. Yeah.
When I came about to do my world, my life, right, I was stubborn because I really didn't want that space. I wanted other people in my kids' space. I didn't want to be taken hostage. It just wasn't something that I just didn't feel like that was healthy. So I strangely brought my kids to work. So like we made like a little like nursery, you know, in our office, and my mom and I would switch places, you know, so I guess she was also a caretaker, but also the lady in front would answer the calls, and occasionally she'd come back and feed. But, you know, the village became very fluid, like, you know, and, you know, Izzy and Andre both grew up, you know, kind of being in the office, but also like I would bring them out to the little like nursery school that they had, and they would come back for half the day, and they would hang out in the office. And yes, it wasn't like I was teaching them, you know, foreign languages all day, you know, like they would just have to hang out in the office and like play with a toy, which, you know, kind of old school, but like that's kind of like what kids do. It wasn't like, you know, such, you know, sometimes these days we feel like we have to like, you know, like entertain our kids all the time, but my kids had to learn how to entertain themselves, you know. And my mom was infuriated. She was like, why are we doing this? Like, this is really hard. Like, why are we running back and forth? And she's like, why don't you just have a nanny or stay at home? Like, why one or the other? And I was kind of like, no, I want to do both. Like, I really I want to be able to work, but I want to see my kids, and I'm just greedy, you know? And it's funny because I heard a lot of those echoes when when COVID happened, because everybody had their kids at home and we're working, and we're like, what the hell is this? I'm like, yes, this is like, you know, like I have people that actually understand, because I felt like so many, you know, I was still working full time. So it wasn't like, I had a lot of friends who were working like 2 days a week, half days, and they had a little bit more of that flexibility. I was like, I actually need to figure out something that's going to work in the context of still working full time, you know? But it was a little chaotic, but at the same time, my kids were very comfortable seeing other people. You know, they were kind of, it fulfilled what I wanted. And then when I came about and I moved to Miami, and I really couldn't keep doing that because it wasn't my mom's office. It was someplace I didn't, and they were old enough that we could have someone that would pick them up from school. They were in school. But I have to tell you, it was really, you know, it was really helpful because, so this person, you know, we found her on care.com, and they do back.
It's a great resource,
right?
yes.
And actually, we ended up finding a couple of people through care.com and interviewing them. Within like 5 minutes, you kind of get a sense like, okay, this person is, you know. I think that one of the things that I would emphasize when people are interviewing the other person is that you want somebody that, because invariably, even though they're taking care of your kids, they're also taking care of you. And the way they take care of you is that they listen, but they also like offer advice to you, for you, but they also like care for you. I know it sounds weird, you know, but like they want to listen to what you have to say, and you feel like you want to listen to what they say. I occasionally have situations
That's why back to the trust thing, it's also a trust that they know what they're doing. Not so much of like, are they going to do something bad, but also like how much can they bring? And you're right, also to you as a parent, because it's nice to have another set of eyes and insight about your specific situation, right? You can listen to podcasts or whatever on parenting, but until somebody who knows your kid says, hey, you know, why don't you try this, or why don't we try this together and have a little bit of skin in the game, then you're more open to listen. But you have to trust that this person is coming from a right place and not trying to patronize you or something like that.
Absolutely. And I think that like it is just as I felt like my job as a pediatrician was taking care of the kids and the parents, right? I feel like when you have a person who is willing to I have sometimes people say that they're wonderful with the kids, but they are so mean to me, right? You hear this every now and then. Someone says that, and I'm like, what are we talking about? Like, what? That doesn't work. Like, this is someone that you're weaving into your family. I think that when I really look back, I think there's a lot of people who know how to take care of kids. Kids are actually pretty easy, you know. Kids are pretty great, you know. But when we really talk about weaving somebody into the fabric of our family, it has to be someone that helps us as much as they help the kids. And, you know, it sounds weird because we're saying like, well, that's not what we're hiring them for. We're hiring them to just take care of our children, right? But in the end of the day, it is their ability to kind of listen and work with you as a team member, because that's what I mean when I say taking care of you, right? Listening to you is how it does affect the effectiveness they have in really being able to care for your children. And I think you have to open the space, because I hear a lot of people say like, well, I have 10 things that they had to do and they didn't do it. Like, I have a list for them. You know, it's kind of like when you're working with a partner, you know, if you're that person that is like constantly barking orders at your partner, right? And never saying, hey, well, what do you think would be good for the kids? What do you think would be? And it may not be exactly what you would want to do, but you're weaving them into the fabric. It's not you just spitting out orders. You're asking for them to contribute to the life of your children and to give them a perspective, you know?
So in a perfect world, that would be a one-on-one kind of relationship, you know, like a single person. But for when it's speaking like a daycare, where you don't talk to like every single person,
Right.
and there might be like someone at the administration, 2 or 3 people in the class, or like the nursery or whatever, like, how do you think that can be established as well? Because you're not going to weave like 5 people into your family,
but what
right? That becomes a big.
But I think that you would have to evaluate the place as an institution to itself. Like, the people they hire is the face that they present to you. And if you go up and like, no, that's not my job. No, I don't know. That's another person. No, I don't know who took care of your kid. Like that. Nah, we're good. Like, I honestly, like, you can really find better places. You know, it's a kind of thing where I find that a lot of people will say, oh, this person seems to always take care of my kid, like in the center. So like my stream of communication is mostly with that person, and they seem to kind of know what's going on and they can kind of help. But I think for me, if you are able to find a more intimate setting within the first like 3 years, kind of like the way that you guys kind of like were friends taking care of, you know, kids, you know, like kind of, you know, like 2 aunties, you know, taking care of the kids. I enjoy that for me a little bit more, at least. And again, that's just my preference, just because I feel like as they get older and they're 3 years old, 4 years old, now they're kind of, you know, who's taking care of them is like other kids too. It's like, it becomes like a stream of, it's not as one-on-one. And so I feel like developmentally, it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more developmentally appropriate, you know, in terms of like having, if you can afford it. It's not always affordable to do it that way, and I understand that. But I do think that it does give you a little bit of understanding that's why I said it's really important to have a flexible situation, because kids' needs change. You know, you might find that your 9-month-old really doesn't like to be home by themselves. Like they really love to go to the park. They love to see other kids. That's the kind of kid that may want to go into a larger setting earlier, because I mean, I felt like my first one was perfectly happy being home, like being with us for like 2 years, you know, and like, okay, fine, I'll go. My second one by 18 months was like, why am I still here with you? Like, why? Can you please show me the other kids? Because like, I think you're nice and everything, but like, it's not doing it for me, you know? So like, it's that kind of thing where you have to be, so many times I feel like in parenthood, we feel everything is like a linear path. And I can't tell you how many times I feel like I try to get onto the path, and then like something comes up just like pushes me like a freight car, you know, off the path, and I'm like, oh, I was trying so hard to do like what everyone else was doing, like, you know, but like I guess I'm going to do it my own way, you know.
It's even more challenging now with like all the social media, where it feels like the path is a one-way.
Yes.
Like you don't have other options. But it does feel like one thing that strikes us when we had our kids was that it's very common in Europe, at least in France, I don't know all about Europe, but for like multiple families to say, hey, let's look at a caretaker together, right? So people who live in the same building or in the same neighborhood or the same village, and they're like, okay, we're going to have one person coming, and then the person can rotate. You know, on Monday they're going to your house, and then you drop the kid there. And on Tuesday they go to that house, and they do like 2 or 3 houses.
Right.
We haven't found that as common here, at least in Florida, in Miami. I don't know how it is, you know, for the rest of the US, if somebody wants to comment about their experience. But it's something that does allow to have a smaller setting, yet to share some of that cost too, because as you said, it's also like it depends on what you can afford. So get the village a little bigger too.
I think that village idea is always better. I will say that I wonder if there's a little bit of more rules because of like the US having more rules in terms of like being a care center or like being validated or like, you know, accredited. And I don't know if that scares people away from being in that situation.
Sure.
But you can find somebody that can share a caretaker with you, you know, and kind of like split some of those costs, and kind of like, I think that makes some more sense, you know, than necessarily kind of putting them in a situation where they're in with a lot of kids and, you know, everyone's getting sick, and it becomes a lot. You know, I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, my kids are supposed to get really sick, you know, first year of life. And I'm like, not necessarily. Like, you know, the first year is tricky, you know, and for them to get sick so much when they're 4 months old is a lot, you know. And I think that we found that with COVID, and people just became more attuned to that idea that like, wow, like, you know, when I had my kid at home for the first year and they didn't see 30 kids like coughing all over them, wow, they didn't get sick, you know, like, is it possible? And it's like, yeah, like that's, you know, they still get stuff all over the tables and everywhere, but for them to acutely get sick each time, all the time like that is not easy for them. It's not good for their system, you know? So I think that there's a big difference when I say kids should be exposed to kids should be sick every month. Do you see I think that difference is not very clearly understood. You know, people are like, isn't it fantastic? No, it's not fantastic. Like, you know, you get chronic sinus issues, you can get chronic issues with your lungs. Like, it's like, that's not fun for anybody, you know, but do I think kids should live in a bubble and never see anybody? No. Like, you know, so it's that kind of thing that we have to kind of see that middle ground. There are a couple books that I think helped me a lot. There was one called Mommy Wars and the other one called Finding Mary Poppins. And the Mommy Wars was just the idea of like, I think that what I got from that book was the idea that every single person does it differently. And
that's important to acknowledge though, like, because it feels like, yeah, we're nodding, but we have to let that sink in for a second.
And it was interesting. It was a person, she was a writer, so she kind of worked at home, worked outside of the home as well. And so she got to see both worlds, right? And her own mother stayed home with her. But she's like, I wish my mom would have gone to work. She clearly resented us. Like, she didn't want to be there. It wasn't what she wanted, you know? But there was no other option when women were that age or whatnot. And her whole thing was like, I don't care if you stay home. I don't care if you work outside of the, you know, the home. I don't care who you have, but in the end of the day, you have to feel good about it. Like you have to have made a decision that you wanted to make. She makes, you know, these wonderful descriptions of like, you know, I think that came up with the Finding Mary Poppins, where like this woman, she was a very, you know, well-known, you know, neurologist. She was obviously really, you know, successful in her field. And she had like 5 kids, and she had this wonderful woman who took care and then taught them table manners, like taught them how to cook, like taught her kids. And she's like, these are all things that like I would have never brought to my child's life. So she was part of my village. And I think you make a great point where like, why does it have to only be one caretaker? You know, take the village, like take the village when you can, add them to your children. You know, you're adding people and experiences to your life, to your kids' life that are invaluable, and allow them to learn how to be with different people, even beyond, say, you know, even like people, you know, like with different, you know, ethnic groups or different languages or different, like, you know, even like different homes. It doesn't have to be like culturally different, you know, but it's that kind of thing where, you know, more people really do give your kids insight as to how the world works and to socialization, you know?
And unless it's one of those extreme situations like you experienced as a kid, but I wouldn't think, maybe you can confirm with your professional experience, that there is any confusion for the kids of who the mom is. Because
No.
I know, maybe I'm going to speak from my own, like, you know, insecurities, but my fear would be like, oh, someone's going to take over and then my kids are going to prefer them over me, like a little bit of an ego, you know, like, but you would remain mom, right? There's only one mom. So.
Oh, great. So it's something that I say all the time, and it's funny because I didn't think they would find itself here, but I always tell people that they have 2 parents if they're lucky, right? And they have thousands of friends. You don't need to be their friend. You hold a very distinct space in their life. And honestly, and I don't want to always, I don't know how this would go out, but like you are required to love your family members, but you don't have to like everybody. And I know that sounds weird. Why would I say that? That's so strange, right? And I say that because, yes, they might like, you know, to play with this other person more, right? Like, you know, or like this person. But in the end of the day, they love you because you are their mom. Do you understand? And I think that sometimes we confuse that. Oh, you know, what she always wants to go and play with this other person. Oh, she must think that that's her mom. What? That's all unrelated, right? Not related. Because in the end of the day, you love your parents. Now, you may not like them all the time, right? Like, I don't always like my kids. Like, I love them. But I don't always, they just stop and I'm like, I'm not liking you right now. I don't like you, right? So I am allowed to do that. So if I'm allowed to do that, they're allowed to sometimes not like me, right? But I'm never not their mom, right? I'm always going to be their mom. And I think
that plays a big role for women who just had a baby to recognize that some of that trust issue and some of that fear of letting go is that, like, what if, you know, all of a sudden they only knew me and they liked somebody better, right? I know it counted for me, I don't know about you, but
and that's okay. Like, again, I'm like, I don't need my kids to always like me. Do you know, like, they like their friend down the street more than they like me. That's totally appropriate. Like, you know, you should not be like this. I actually sometimes get kind of uncomfortable when grown adults are like my best friends or my parents, you know, and I'm like, like that's interesting. Like, your best friends should be people that live with you and like live in your life, you know, like your parents are your parents, you know, and there are ways that my parents have incredibly been helpful to me for me to understand like where I come from, you know, what's important. But there are many ways where I completely 100% disagree with my parents. Like, not even like kind of, like a lot. You know, does that mean that they're not my parents anymore? No, that's just the rope of love, you know, that like sometimes I like you and sometimes I don't, but the rope still exists between us. And
yeah,
it's
sometimes, yeah, and I think it was a week ago, I remind Zoe, because sometimes kids can be tricky about the attention and the affective stream that you have with them. And last time, I think I was strict about something, and I don't know if she was mad at me, and she said, you know, I want my teacher, Miss Fernandez. So I was a little bit upset, and I said, you know what, Zoe, you love your teacher. I'm absolutely in love with that, because that's fine. I like that you love to go to school, but who is home every day? Who cook meal every day? Who take care of you every day? Who read you a story every day? And she was like, it's you, mommy. I was like, yeah, I'm here every day for you by law, but I'm here. I'm the one who take care of you for every boo-boos, every night, everything. So just a little reminder. And she was like, yeah, and she gave me a hug. Like, but you know, sometimes they are tricky. So I took it personally in that moment. I really shouldn't, but I was like, hey, don't play that with me. That's kind of
and she, you know, she played it like she knew that it would.
yeah.
Most kids know. Most kids know that, and you know, I want to say unfortunately, but like, you know, a lot of women, we have some deep, deep insecurities when it comes to this.
Yeah.
You know, we have kind of this strange like trauma that we like are carrying, this whole idea of incredible amounts of guilt. And I don't understand it, because I do think that it actually makes us very ineffective as parents, you know, because we so easily manipulated. You know, so when I spend this moment saying, listen, like your job is not to make your kids like you, right?
Yeah.
Is for them to continue to love you, right? Whether they like it or not. Like I will have to love my kids, whether I like it or not, because they're my kids. And it, you know, but it's that kind of thing where we feel this need sometimes to buy their, you know, likes, you know, we liked by them, you know? And I mean, that's why discipline, sometimes it sounds terrible, but like I will turn to like perhaps the male, if it's, you know, heteronormative relationship, and I will say like, you're going to have to be the one that puts down the discipline, because she's dripping with guilt, like right now, like literally, like the kids, like, no, I know you don't mean it, whatever, you know, do your thing, you know, like, but when dad does it, you know, for some reason, they're like, oh my God, for real? Like, I'm, you know, I was supposed to do that. And you're like, why did that work so much better? You know, and because he walks in it without that guilt. He doesn't feel guilty about discipline. He knows that that's actually really important for them. There are a lot of ways, you know, I watch other generations, and through that guilt, you know, they think that they're helping, that they're protecting their kids who are now grown adults, right? But in the end of the day, they're only making life harder for them, because they're not really like teaching them how to live within this world. And this world is very difficult, you know, and sometimes like, you know, love, like to succeed, you have to be able to kind of do things you don't want to do.
Yeah.
That's a hard one. I feel like the new generation is not, we're kind of deviating from the caretaker thing, but it is a big, maybe we should do an episode about that.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that?
Welcome.
So that's
that's our next topic.
So back to caretaker, like if we expand a little bit, how would you, because part of the caretaker is also finding a medical provider, right? And you happen to know a thing or two about that. So what would be, do you think, the fundamental of finding somebody? And is it important to find the right caretaker, or should we just look at, you know, Google and be like pediatrician around me and pick the first one that comes in? Like, what do you have to pitch in onto that conversation?
You know, I think that there are many ways that let me see how I'm going to say this. I'm just going to take a moment. You know, I mean, I come from, you know, parents who are from third world countries who are pediatricians. And so, and I say that because, you know, maybe some people look down on that or whatnot, but for me, it gave me a very idealistic view of what a doctor should be. You know, where they come from, you know, like you know, my parents from Thailand, like everyone is like, oh, you know, doctor this, doctor that, because the doctor is like a part of the community, and they know that that doctor is there to kind of take care of everyone in the community.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my uncle, who was a surgeon, trained at Case Western, went back to Thailand, and people would say, you know, like, why did he go back? He could make so much money in the U.S. And he would say, he goes, I don't mind getting paid in chickens, you know, like, you know, and so, he had, when he did, you know, I mean, there was a line for hours outside of the temple waiting, you know, with people coming to pay respects, because when he says he took care of the community, he took care of the community. Mm-hmm. This model does not really exist very much in the United States anymore.
Unfortunately, yes.
So we are at a space where there have to be choices, right? And I think this does kind of delve into kind of the caretaker space, right? Because what you need to do, at least what I would do as I sat looking at like my options of what to do, you know, some people have a large extended family where like this sister takes care of the kid this day, right? This brother takes it, you know, like, you know, that's how they like, and so they don't really, this conversation is not so much, you know, having a good, you know, being able to like communicate well with other caretakers is really important. You know, for a doctor, I think it's somebody that you need to know what you need. There are some people that are like, my number one need is convenience. I don't really care who I see. I want to be able to see someone at my convenience. Fine. I think a big practice is fantastic for that. Right? Some people say, you know, I have a lot of questions and I really want to make sure that when I walk out of the room, like I feel like I have peace of mind, right? And that's, you need a more kind of like a smaller situation. Like I think that you can find some private practitioners around, but I mean, as someone who unfortunately has kind of like left that system, you know, I feel like it's hard because even in a small practice, you know, you're expected to see 25, 30 patients a day, and half the patients are there just for paperwork. You know, like they don't even know why they're there. I don't know why they're there. The insurance company knows why they're there, but like nobody else knows why we're there. And so I think that the more that you can figure out, you know, what will meet my needs is the most important. Like if you're someone, you know, I think I really enjoyed my conversations with a lot of immigrant parents too, or people who kind of had smaller communities, because they kind of did enjoy having a little bit more of that conversation. They kind of need a little bit more context. Mm-hmm. So, because when you're alone and, you know, when you're not here with all of your family, right? If you're here with all of your family, you don't need more conversation, right? Like you're like, I've got everybody. It's like, I don't really need more of that, you know, and I would recognize that. But for people sometimes that were like, you know, listen, like we're the only people in the US. Like, yes, I have friends and stuff, you know, but I don't really have a whole community. Can I ask you some questions? I'm a little confused about this and that, you know. That may not be under what my job is as a pediatrician, but I enjoyed that part, you know, because I feel like so much of raising children is figuring out what you need as their parent. And that goes back to the original thing. When we talk about figuring out a caretaker, we have to go back to and you have to know your needs. I think the thing that I was very upset about with my mother when she had that whole situation is that her needs changed and things were changing, but at no point did she say, hey, that doesn't work with me. I need you to do this and I don't need you to do that. Right? I don't want you to do that. But she felt like almost like she was doing something bad by working, right? And that, you know, at least this person's taking care of my kids. Well, you know, she may be like, I may disagree with her with everything that she's saying, but at least she's taking care of my kids. And I felt like that's just not true. No, then find somebody else. Like I don't believe that someone should make you feel awful about who you are, right? And what you do in exchange of taking care of your kids. Like my mom would say, like, oh, I'm not good at playing with you. You know, she's better with playing with you, so I'm going to go wash the dishes while she plays for you. You know, like, you know, I would have wanted my mom. Like I would have wanted my mom if you would have asked me, even if she's not good at playing with me, you know, but I would have wanted that time with her. But she was kind of made to believe that she was inadequate by having a caretaker. I'll be honest with you, I sometimes have people when they have like night nurses, right? Which is really common. A lot of people have that. Be careful who you find. Well, I mean, it's not be careful, but like talk to them. Because if they're like, no lady, you don't know anything you're talking about, I'm going to take care of this kid, you don't touch your kid, that's a big red flag to me. Because what the hell? What is that? You know, like, you have to be able to like voice your concerns, be able to be flexible and say, okay, well, this is working for me, this is not working for me. I'd love for you to do this, but you know, this would help. Oh, that's a good point. Okay, maybe, yeah, if you guys do that with that, that would be fun, right? That's
So what we hear you saying is that you need to find people in your village that empower you, or
yes.
like it's a team member, right? Just like you wouldn't, you know, play a sport with someone who just want to play solo, or someone who don't.
Right.
You're looking for people who can bring value and then solidify the strengths of each one of the team member, whether it's you, whether it's your partner, the kid
Right.
as well, because they're a big part in that team. So
Oh.
finding people who pull you up, and you can pull up as well.
Yeah, and I do like family members. I mean, you guys became practically family, like at this point, right? I mean,
Very much so.
Yeah, I kind of come from that, like, so people, you know, I mean, when I grew up, auntie and uncle, like, you know, everybody was like, it doesn't matter, you know, and it became a situation where my parents were kind of constructing the village as much as they could, you know, and, you know, the people that took care of my kids, like, they became part of our family. So that was really important for us to kind of include them. Some people say, I want more boundaries, you know, like, you come from 9 to 5, that's it. And that's fine. Like, again, whatever feels right to you, but know that this is somebody that you're weaving into your life, and that you have to be just as comfortable with them as your kids are.
And this person doesn't have to do also everything. Like, I feel like sometimes we have a tendency to say, oh, I want a caregiver who can do the mom job, they can clean the house, they can play with the kid, they can teach them Japanese, they can blah, blah, blah. But there's more than one person can do.
Yeah.
So maybe focusing on what exactly is necessary, so that you have time maybe to add what you can add best, and then you can have, you know, the TV can teach the Japanese.
Yeah, it's I think that, so there's almost like I almost see like almost two extremes, and I kind of think that somewhere in the middle is the best. I have people who are completely kind of not able to really speak up for themselves, so they're not really creating, like, they're like, okay, well, whatever, okay, yeah, okay, yeah, you know, just like almost like a really like a low self-confidence about it. And then you have people who come in and they're like you said, like, I want you to do like 25 things, and when you don't do one thing, you're out. Like, you know, it's a very like, and I mean, that's not a really like nurturing environment. That's not a really nurturing, you know? And I think that when I say that it's funny, because I think that's good to specify. When I say that I want someone who cares for you as well, I'm not necessarily saying that, like, and when you're done with the kids, I want you to give me a back rub, you know, and give me a back, like, I didn't say that. I'm not saying that, like, and if they do that, great. Like, I mean, what are you going to say? Like, you know, I remember my husband was so mad at me because, you know, our kids were getting older. They didn't really need a nanny as much, you know, but she was great, because I would come home and she would have like cleaned something and like put a candle out. Like that the candle got me. Like, if I came in and she had a candle, I was just like, oh my God, this is wonderful. Like, I was like so tired. I was like, someone put a candle, and it's just, I don't know why. I mean, it would just get me every time. You know, when we, she had to move on and whatnot, you know, I was like, but who's going to take care of me? And he was like, okay, this is not, let's just be clear. Like, you know, you feel like you're going to miss her, but like, that's not really why we hired her. So let's just kind of like, that. And so I think that it's important, you know, again, to when I say that someone cares for you, it means that someone that actually says, I'm going to be a team member. I want to hear what you have to say. I'm going to contribute as well. We're going to work on this together. And
so it has to be a choice on their part, as ideally as much as a choice on yours. I mean, you have to feel like they also actively want to be in that relationship, partnership with you, which you can find in a daycare. I mean, it does feel that you're like, okay, they have the kids' interest at heart. They want to talk to us, even though sometimes the communication can be hectic. But having that intent for them to be in that with you, as you said, together is very key.
And you kind of break, you know, while I want you to be able to voice yourself. So here we are talking about, for some people who have like very low self-esteem, right? to kind of be able to say, yes, I'm going to be an active participant in this relationship. That's a big step for them, right? Because they don't have a lot of self-esteem about how they raise kids. But on the other hand, if you were like, I am the boss and you are my servant, like that doesn't really like, that doesn't really like say team member. Like, you know, and what you're going to get is somebody that's working, but not necessarily like investing in your children. And so I think what you want to sense is that they want to care for your children and they want to care for you. But if it's a situation, they're like, okay, well, where's the list? I'll check off the list. You know, it's a funky situation. You know, you're not going to get what you're, I think in the end of the day, trust is built when you see your kid thriving and someone kid, you know, but at the same time, you have to understand if it's somebody that's taking advantage of the situation, it may not be a good fit. And if it's not a good fit for you, then it's not a good fit for the baby or for the kid. And it's a whole kind of like unit that you're creating. You know?
Which you're going to repeat. I mean, spoiler alert for people who have kids like either pregnant or babies, you have that when they start school as well, right? Because in that case, you can pick the establishment, but you're not going to pick the teacher, you're not going to pick the aftercare staff, you're not going to pick the, you know, the school secretariat lady or whatever. So it's also preparation, as we talked before, that every step that we go through is preparation for the next step. It is very forming as a parent to say, okay, I need to start building that trust, because one of the, you know, the comment that we have that somebody watching who said it's hard to trust. If you don't trust when they're 1, it's not going to come up when they're 5, and all of a sudden you have to really let go, because it feels like at some point in school you let go and you don't really see what's happening. So if you haven't built those elements of trust before that, it can be pretty traumatic. So,
and I don't know how the conversation goes with yourself, but like if you're someone that has a really, really hard time where it's almost debilitating, where you just don't trust anybody, you know, that's a conversation that's a little bit more about like what's going to do.
Yeah.
Because often we'll carry on traumas, and maybe something happened and something, you know, built up, or you saw relationships that were really, you know, perhaps like really unhealthy, you know? And I think that even for myself, like when I came into choosing a caregiver, like I still had trauma from what I saw happen to when I was growing up. And I think that really did color how I wanted to have a caretaker, because I almost was in a situation where I know who I am. I know I'm not a very I'm outspoken here. I talk a lot, and I talk a lot about speaking up for yourself, but my basic energy like is like, oh, okay, like I definitely will fold onto myself quicker than I should. And I think that I was afraid, knowing myself, that if I came in with a very domineering personality, that I could be talked into feeling pretty bad about myself pretty quickly. So it wasn't a matter that I didn't trust other people. I didn't trust myself. To be able to hold my ground and be like, yo, that's not working out. Like, you know, and there were even moments when I even brought I remember there was one lady at the office who was like, no, go work. Don't touch your baby. I'll take care of your baby. No touch. And I would literally be like, I just saw like 30 patients and I haven't even seen my kid all day. Like, that's not, what was the purpose of this? Like, that wasn't the purpose. I wanted to see my kid. And I literally, I was like, you know, I remember I came home to my husband. I'm like, I'm not happy. Like, this is not working out. And he's like, what's wrong with you? She works in your office. You can just ask her to, like, you know, it's okay, you know? And I was like, I can? Like, I was really like, I'm not good at that. You know, it's not within my nature. You know, I will just go along, you know? And I remember I came the next day, thank you so much for taking care of my kid. And like, this is way beyond, but like, we're good. Like, you know, you're good. And I'll just take breaks. And like, you know, and I had to like kind of, I without being aggressive, like, you know, what are you doing? But I had to create my boundary. And I think that it becomes difficult. Like, I think with my mom, I'm actually more empathetic to her situation because the person was living with us. So it wasn't a situation where like...
And I mean, there is so much also that you have to deal with as a parent, that when something is working, or at least you feel like you've established that, it's hard to challenge it. You're like, oh, I have to readdress this topic again. Like, which is what we've been talking about for all kind of things, you know, like the sleeping, the potty training, the eating. It feels like, oh no, I got it. And then if life challenges you and send you sideways. You're like, damn again.
And I tell this to people, I'm like, when stuff is going smooth, like, right? Smooth, I'm like I'm so nervous. I'm like, because I know that that is not nature. Nature is chaos. Like, honestly, like, it's not that like you get better at the chaos. You just get more used to it. You know, you just get more used to the fact that like, it's always up in the air. Like there's always, you know? And so you need, I think that when I look back on my life, like with my kids at least, like the more agile you are of like, kind of like, you know, moving back and forth and up and down and like just going with them, it's fun. It's actually incredible to raise children, right? But the minute that you try to like import, you know, like specific rules and like this is how it's going to go, and I know, oh my God, it's like fighting, like walking through quicksand. It's like just like you just never can seem to get out of it, you know? So you have to just go with it. You have to just go with the nonsense. And I mean, listen, my kids are in college. I still have nonsense. I still have like you know, where I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, you are a grown person. What is this nonsense? You know, so like, sorry, like it doesn't get better. It just gets, but I think that the one thing I would take away with like, you have to have you skin in the game when you're choosing someone, and you have to have like a situation that you can be a part of, that you can come in and out of, that you can say, hey, this works, this doesn't work. You have to have a fluid arrangement.
So work together, you know, having this back and forth of collaboration. So you're looking more for a partner,
Yes.
like than for a caregiver, right? Because you caregive jointly, so you still caregive. They give care. Everybody gives care, but you're just adding a team member to your team.
That's it. I think that is a better context.
So let's hope this helped you guys watching. And was a pleasure to be with you, Dr. Perlman. And then we'll see you in 2 weeks for another episode of Mom Talks with a French accent.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.